Previously on L35.
So, what's the deal with Sonic Adventure, anyways? It's...
And now, the conclusion.
Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, Sonic 1 for Game Gear.
In 1989, the Sega Genesis released in North America to mixed response. Despite the console's more advanced capabilities compared to the ubiquitous Nintendo Entertainment System, recognition had still lagged behind that of its boxy rival. This partially stemmed from the fact that in spite of the presence of an aggressive marketing campaign, the 16-bit system still lacked a system seller, a game that fully showed off its power in a way 8-bit consoles could only dream of. However, this all changed in 1991, as when faced with the impending launch of Nintendo's own 16-bit console, Sega came back swinging with its brand new title, Sonic the Hedgehog. While many prior platformers had been centered around precise jumping and tricky parkour, Sonic was an entirely new take on the genre, as levels were mostly designed to reward outright speed, with Sonic being able to roll into a ball and blast through rows of enemies without slowing down at all. Another point in Sonic's favor was his characterization. While characters such as Mario had a fairly aloof appearance, Sonic was by contrast shown to be a fast, edgy, wisecracking guy with an attitude, complementing how Sega's own marketing portrayed Nintendo as little more than a children's toy and the Genesis towards an older audience. Finally, while games such as Super Mario featured fairly bland, uniform level themes, Sonic featured a variety of different level environments, for better and for worse. With all these factors combined, Sonic took the market by storm, catapulting Genesis sales ahead of that of the NES once and for all, just in time to combat the Super Nintendo. However, Sega wasn't just content with toppling the home console market. In the handheld space, Nintendo had been in full control since 1989, when the Game Boy came out. Despite more advanced competition from upstarts Atari and NEC, the Game Boy still held strong at the forefront. A few months prior to Sonic's release, Sega had thrown their hat into the ring as well with the Game Gear. However, the Game Gear needed its own system seller, something to justify buying it that blew anything available on the Game Boy out of the water, similar to what Sonic had done for the Genesis. So, what did Sega come up with? Well, if it worked the first time, Sonic the Hedgehog on Game Gear is an interesting game. While the whole point of Sonic had been to show off how their 16-bit system was able to do things impossible on an 8-bit one, here was Sonic showing off the capabilities of an 8-bit system.
So, how did Sonic on Game Gear turn out?
Compared to Sonic on Genesis, the title screen here is a bit lacking. However, starting the game quickly washes that away with a fateful interpretation of Green Hill Zone. While the layout is completely different to the original, it more than serves its purpose at being a simple level for new players to learn the ropes. Sonic can roll into a ball to gain momentum on hills, but can't spin dash, as that would only be introduced to the franchise in Sonic 2. You can also enter special stages by completing a level with 50 rings or more. While the special stages in classic Sonic games typically prove a point of contention, I personally enjoyed the ones present here, however that may very well be due to their lack of difficulty. In the Genesis titles, special stages had the reward of a Chaos Emerald at the end, but had the trade-off of being extremely unforgiving, as any mistake would see you booted back to the game proper. However, in Sonic on Game Gear, the special stages merely serve as a place for you to rack up extra lives and continues, with the only challenge present being a lenient time limit. Instead of being placed in the special stages, the Chaos Emeralds are hidden in the main levels, one for each environment. Collecting all 6 of them grants you the good ending of the game, as you see Robotnik's base literally get vaporized off the island, but little else other than the ability to say,
I beat Sonic 1 on Game Gear.
Before the start of each level, a map representing Sonic's progress throughout the island appears.
I really like this map, as it provides the extra cohesion between levels that was sorely lacking in the Genesis game. I mean, come on, you're telling me I walked 30 feet to the right and there's a giant factory next to the ruins? That's gotta be in violation of some sort of zoning code.
Each zone itself is split into 3 stages, consisting of 2 acts and a boss fight. The second act of Green Hill Zone serves a similar purpose to the first. However, the primary focus here seems to be teaching players to fear water. After that, it's on to Act 3 and the first boss of the game. While Sonic bosses are somewhat infamous for their difficulty, or more than often lack thereof, I don't think even the most cynical of players would expect this. I honestly thought the game was broken on my first time here, but apparently this is just how the first boss fight is supposed to go down, with Robotnik seemingly minding his own business and you trying to kill him. After that, it's on to Bridge Zone. Compared to the previous level, this plays completely different, as while Green Hill Zone focused on Sonic's speed, Bridge Zone feels more like a conventional platformer level. Other things introduced in Bridge Zone are these moving platforms, and these sections that collapse as you run across them, which the game really doesn't seem to like. Act 2 plays out in much the same way, but this time with a constantly panning camera you have to keep up with. Compared to Green Hill, the boss in Act 3 is far more frustrating, as while conventionally it shouldn't be a challenge, Sonic's controls while jumping just feel slippery in this game. Jungle Zone is another very platforming heavy level. Act 1 sees a few fun gimmicks, such as vines you can roll off of, and these logs you can use to traverse bodies of water by balancing on. But the real highlight is Act 2, where you're traveling up a waterfall to climb a mountain. The boss fight here is relatively simple, with the premise being that you're trying to attack Robotnik while dodging rolling barrels.
However, now that we're at the top of the mountain, we can finally get onto Robotnik's base, right?
Labyrinth Zone is a nightmare to get through. Sonic's speed is slowed to a crawl underwater, and the game becomes a slog as you have to try not to drown. The only thing this level has on the Genesis version is that it seems to take longer to run out of air, but I'm not sure if that's more by design or the game suffering from visible slowdown for most of the stage. The fight with Robotnik is relatively underwhelming, as to my knowledge it's impossible to run out of air here, and you can dodge all of his attacks by simply hiding in the corner. Scrap Brain Zone is completely different from the version in the original, as while that one was more of a test of survival, the one here feels like a maze with different switches and one-way doors. Act 2 ramps this up to 11, with the maze aspect being combined with springs. However, the most interesting thing here is the lack of a boss fight, as instead you board an elevator straight up to the final level. Sky Base Zone closes out the game, and it's easily the most unique level here. Act 1 sees you dodging a grid of turrets and lightning, while the second act features a slow-moving ride on platforms before having to dodge more turrets. After this, the final boss fight of the game takes place against Robotnik, but this time with 2 attacks. Fire shoots up out of the ground to prevent Sonic from getting close, while electricity comes out of the ceiling and he's already dead.
That's Sonic the Hedgehog on Game Gear. It's a decent game for what it is, but I can't help but feel like it lacks any real sort of substance, sort of like it wasn't what I was originally supposed to review.